There he is. Okay, good afternoon, one and all. We just took our picture. We all look very nice. All smiling together, 100 members. Or
It'll be like in June.
we'll still be smiling. Okay, I want to thank everyone for being here, and a special thanks to Senators Murray, Wyden, and Whitehouse for joining us. They're three chairs of three incredibly important committees to deliver for the American people. However, the House Republicans have taken the American people hostage. As you know, yesterday, Secretary Yellen warned that the U.S. government will likely default on its debt obligations as soon as June 1st. That's only 30 days from now. Rather than listen to reason, Speaker McCarthy has caved to extremists. By passing the Default on America Act, he's handed the keys over to the House Freedom Caucus, who are more than happy to let the U.S. default if they don't get every last cut and every last unrelated hard right policy that they want. In fact, the American people haven't even had the ability to look at what's in this awful bill, and I think they deserve to see it. And I believe Speaker McCarthy, from just a few weeks ago, would agree with me. Let me quote Speaker McCarthy the day he became Speaker. Here's what he said. Quote, "I want to give all Americans a personal invitation. You're welcome to see this body at work. No longer will the doors be closed, but the debates will be open for you to witness what happens in people's houses. From the committee rooms to this floor, we commit to pursue the truth passionately and embrace debate. No more one-sided inquiries. Competing ideas will be put to the test in public so that the best ideas win." Well, Mr. Speaker, I agree. You didn't do it, but that's what I am setting out to do here in the Senate. This bill was written and amended in the dead of night, behind closed doors, with a pen in the MAGA Republican hands. So starting this week, we will be doing what the House didn't do, showing the American people what this bill is made of. If Republicans refuse to level with the American people about their bill, Senate Democrats are more than happy to do it. We'll show the American people how Republicans' Default on America Act will decimate federal law enforcement in this country, erasing nearly 30,000 law enforcement jobs and leaving border security hanging out to dry. They'll see how the DOA is a direct assault on families, slashing child care, cutting Pell Grants, and gutting vital programs like Meals on Wheels. Americans will also see how this is a handout for big corporations and the ultra-rich with their tax giveaways, while leaving the rest of American families out in the dust. So this week will be the very first legislative hearing in either House that actually looks at what the Default on America Act does. If Republicans want to sell their awful agenda to the American people, they're welcome to do so in debates about the budget. As Democrats expose the Default on America bill for what it is, our position remains the same. Both parties should pass a clean bill to avoid default together before we hit the critical upcoming June 1st deadline. As one House Freedom Caucus member said plainly, Speaker McCarthy cannot get to 218 votes with changes to this deal. Let me quote that again. Speaker McCarthy, according to a House Freedom Caucus member, and every one of them has a lot of power, said Speaker McCarthy, quote, cannot get to 218 with changes to this deal. There are likely two options left for McCarthy. Either Republicans cause a first-ever default on the national debt or go for their awful bill. There's a better alternative. We pass a bipartisan clean bill to protect the full faith and credit of the U.S. As Americans will see through these hearings, the DOA would tear at the fabric of American society, imposing dramatic cuts to public security, the cruel abandonment of veterans, terrible job loss, blocking access to health care, and brutal attacks on working families. Senate Democrats won't let that happen. Not now, not ever. Senator Murray.
Thank you, Senator Schumer. I want to make very plain what's happening here in Congress. The Secretary of Treasury wrote to Congress yesterday, and she told us that if House Republicans continue to refuse to pay the nation's bills, then we may see a default on our debt as early as June 1st. If Republicans force this country to default for the first time ever in our nation's history, then our economy will crash. American workers will lose their jobs. Seniors will lose big on their retirement savings. It's just going to be painful. Speaker McCarthy's big plan, his #1 economic priority, is to threaten economic catastrophe and hold the full faith and credit of the U.S. hostage. And in exchange, they want us to pass their Default on American Act so they can cut essential government services that we all rely on. They're going to slash funding for our veterans, make our country less safe, and surrender our economic competitiveness to China. House Republicans do not want to pay our nation's bills like we have done on a bipartisan basis so many times before, unless they can take a chainsaw to our economy with draconian cuts that will kill nearly 800,000 jobs and send us careening into a recession. I want to take a moment to make clear to the American people, if you think this bill wouldn't affect you, you are wrong. Maybe your family never needed SNAP benefits like mine did when I was growing up, but this proposal is a disaster for everyone. The MAGA Republican Default on American Act would slash vital funding that keeps our planes in the sky, our trains on the rails, and our food and medicine safe. The MAGA Republicans would pull cops off our streets, drive a wrecking ball through our border security, making it easier for deadly fentanyl to flood our streets. And if that weren't bad enough, House Republicans want spending caps that will lock in even more cuts due to inflation for the next decade. That is 10 years of China and our competitors investing in their economies, growing stronger, and gaining ground, while House Republicans tie our hands and force us to fall further and further behind. A lost decade for America. That is what MAGA Republicans are proposing. This is so backwards. China is not debating right now whether to wreck their credit or tank their economy. So why are House Republicans? Why do they want to threaten economic catastrophe and put us behind? House Republicans need to understand that holding the majority means they need to actually govern. It is past time to get serious about working with Democrats to simply pay our nation's bills and avoid a catastrophic default as soon as possible. Speaker McCarthy needs to start working with us to keep America competitive, to keep our economy growing, and to keep investing in our families and in our future. Here in the Senate, we are hard at work on bipartisan spending bills to move our country forward, not back. That's what we should all be focused on right now. Thank you.
Senator White.
Thank you, Leader Schumer. And everybody understands that in a divided Congress, there will be disagreement and debates on economics, but there cannot be any debate that risks default for our country. The fact is that House Republicans are not offering a good faith proposal. That's because they give a free pass to billionaires and hammer Meals on Wheels. The fact is there have been House Republicans, you saw it all over the press over the weekend, openly admitting that they'll never support anything less than the ransom note that they passed last week. So this is all about holding our economy hostage to extract ideological trophies that cut clean energy, that surrender on the climate crisis and affordable health care, and enrich so many of their powerful allies. Wasn't any great feat for the Speaker to get this through the House. It was literally a competition among his far-right members to craft the worst piece of legislation possible to send to the Senate. The fact is, the Speaker of the House is in a much weaker position within his own conference than John Boehner was 12 years ago. And that's something that ought to concern all Americans who want sensible, good government, the way we did over the Trump administration and said we're going to come together and pay our bills. The fact is, the clear path to protecting our country and the millions of jobs Republicans are putting in danger is right in front of us. It is a clean bill to avoid default. And that, I just want to come back to, because I was the senior Democrat on the Finance Committee when I was asked again and again during the Trump administration, are you going to step up as we all face the question of what default would mean? And I said, of course we're going to stand up, because that's what you do when you're standing up for the well-being of our country. And that's why Ronald Reagan was against playing politics with default. It's why we came together during the Trump administration to prevent default. And I call on the Speaker to say that's what we'll do again. Thank you, Mr. Leader.
The White House.
Thanks, Leader Schumer. The MAGA extremists in the House have presented America with two absolutely terrible choices. Both default, which would be a disaster, and the Default on America Act, which would be a disaster, do serious and lasting damages to the economy. Either way, default or Default on America, hundreds of thousands of jobs are lost, billions in American GDP is sacrificed. Why present us with that choice? Who wins from the chaos and economic destruction that they would create? Well, I'll tell you who wins. Creepy billionaires whose ideology requires them to hate the United States government. They'll do great. Huge polluters who want to be able to pollute for free at the expense of every other American, they'll do great. In fact, 270 pages plus of the 320-page bill is devoted to polluter handouts. So we have to put a stop to this. They have to threaten this way because they know Americans hate what they're trying to sell. So we have to stand firm. I look forward to the President explaining in the meeting to the Speaker directly the harm that he proposes to cause, and I hope it'll cause cooler heads to prevail.
Questions? Yes.
Will you put a Republican bill on the floor and allow your caucus and Republicans to vote up or down on it, and will you do the same with the clean debt ceiling?
Well, as you know, I Rule 14'd a clean debt ceiling package. It goes till December 31st, 2024. That's what Democrats believe in. We're going to wait till our meeting on the 9th, and then we'll make a determination. As for the other bill, they sent it to us, and after we pass a clean debt ceiling bill and get the debt ceiling bill moved way back, then we could use this bill for a proper discussion of the appropriations and budget process, where people have plans, different decisions on spending and on revenues. Yes.
You had said for months that House Republicans need to produce their plan. They did. You said that you didn't think they had the votes. They had the votes. You probably don't have 60 votes for a clean debt ceiling increase. So isn't it incumbent upon you and the White House to negotiate a deal with spending cuts to raise the debt ceiling?
These cuts, as we have pointed out, as our hearings will, are so draconian. The American people don't want them, and we cannot. These are not even cuts. And this is not a plan. This is a hard right-wing wish list that everyone knows has no chance of passing and puts the American people in. McCarthy's giving two choices, given his hard right and how he's caved into them. Either a plan that defaults on the debt or a plan that defaults on American families in a very, very severe way. Yes.
Is a short-term extension of the debt limit going to be necessary at a certain point?
We should not kick the can down the road. I believe we should go for the full 2-year extension that I Rule 14'd.
Leader Schumer, what's your view on this Online Child Protection Act for digital things here? Senator Blackburn, Senator Blumenthal, would you consider that bill? Should it be put
Yeah, I believe we need some kind of child protections in an online bill. Yes.
Just to follow up on Manu's question on any middle ground, are there any cuts that you would even be comfortable making, putting on the table to get to our middle ground?
There's obviously a time to talk about that. It's not as hostage-taking with the debt ceiling. It comes afterwards when we talk about the budget and appropriations process. That's how it's been done the last 3 times under President Trump, even when the Republicans had complete control, under President Trump again when it was divided, and under President Biden. So the time to discuss those cuts is not hostage-taking with the debt ceiling. That is too dangerous. The time to discuss it is afterwards, as we usually do in the budget and appropriations process. Yes.
Do you think there's merit to the theory that the 14th Amendment supersedes the statutory debt limit?
Look, the way to go is a clean debt ceiling extension, and that's the direction we want to go in. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Got a call from the speaker from Israel last night, and also the president called about the meeting the president's asked us to come to on May the 9th. I'll be there. I believe the speaker has announced he'll be there as well. But let's be perfectly clear about where we are. The House has passed a bill which raises the debt ceiling and outlines House Republican priorities. Many people thought that wouldn't happen. It has. The message to the president at this point is also pretty clear. You've got a choice between accepting the House bill or entering into a discussion which the Speaker's been trying to have with the President for some time for an agreement between the two of them. In this situation, and I've been through a few of these debt ceiling dramas, there is no solution in the Senate. We have divided government. The American people gave the Republicans the House. The Democrats have the presidency. The President and the Speaker need to reach an agreement to get us past this impasse. That's my message going down to the White House meeting. It'll be my message in the White House meeting, and I think that's clearly the way we get to a solution.
Well, that is the leader, I think, made the point very, very well. There is no deal that gets done that can't pass the House of Representatives and be signed into law by the President. This is a conversation that needs to happen. It's been 90 days since President Biden has made any effort to reach out to Speaker McCarthy. Speaker McCarthy's been available, continues to be available, and now has a product or a result to act on. And the President's position, the Democrats' position of not negotiating is not sustainable. And the other thing that's not sustainable is our national debt. If you look at what's happened just in the last decade or so, in 2010, interest on the debt was just a little bit under $200 billion a year. In 2022, it's $475 billion a year, a 142% increase. And the Committee for Responsible Budget tells us that out of every dollar of the debt for the next 10 years, 50 cents out of every dollar of the debt will be used for nothing more than to pay interest on the debt. This has got to be dealt with. Senator Schumer has said that, he wants to put there's votes for a clean debt limit. I don't know where he's getting his information, because there aren't the votes for a clean debt limit. What we do know is that in 7 of the last 10 negotiations on the debt limit, there have been budgetary reforms. So 70% of the time the debt limit gets lifted, there has been a discussion, conversation around, and a negotiation about budgetary and policy reforms. That's what needs to happen this time. And that's supported by the American people. Polls show that 65% of the American people believe that you shouldn't raise the debt limit without doing something about the debt. And so that's where the American people are, and clearly that's where we are. And I just hope that in the next few days, hopefully by the time when this meeting happens on May 9th, we can see serious and real progress, or else the administration will be the first administration ever to have to deal with a default on the debt, because a clean debt limit is not going to happen. And I think they need to understand that, get serious about sitting down at the table. And if the X date actually is June 1, that brings an additional sense of urgency to this situation. We need to get there, and hopefully the administration will finally pick up the ball and start going to work in addressing this important issue.
Joe Biden is playing Russian roulette, as well as the Democrats, with our Americans' economy. It's dangerous. It's reckless. The president and the Democrats are fear-mongering, threatening to default on the debt. They believe it's okay to continue to borrow and spend money we don't have, and the American people deserve better. This spending binge that the Democrats have been on the last 2 years has brought us record high inflation, 40-year high inflation, and a debt of over $31 trillion. As a result, 2/3 of Americans say if you're going to raise the debt ceiling, you need to tie it to some reforms in spending. That's what American families have to do if, for one reason or another, they max out their credit cards. And the Republicans in the House of Representatives have done just that in terms of coming forward with reforms that are responsible, that address the issue. And you take a look at what they've included in there, things like clawing back unused COVID money. Of course, that's very popular with the American people. Tying work for able-bodied American adults who don't have children, tying that to welfare. Again, the American public agrees. So it's time for President Biden to take his head out of the sand and sit down and talk and negotiate with Speaker McCarthy. Maybe the president believes that there's no cutting to be done. There's no waste, fraud, or abuse in government. Well, there's clearly areas where we can do reforms that are needed, to the point that the 8 times that reforms have been done tied to a raising of the debt ceiling, well, Joe Biden was either in Congress or as the Vice President of the United States. He's been for 6 of the 8. So it is time for Joe Biden to end this debt ceiling madness.
It is very much time for Joe Biden to come to the table and negotiate with Kevin McCarthy. It is the right thing to do. This administration is wreaking havoc with America. It's impacting our farmers, our ranchers, and our small businesses. And speaking of small businesses, happy National Small Business Week. As the ranking member of the Senate Small Business Committee, I am committed to working for our small businesses and easing up on federal regulation that impacts our small businesses, that overburdensome worries that our small businesses have in trying to get out the reports they need to meet their obligations to the federal government. We've seen everything from WOTUS to Biden's electric vehicle rule, to even stripping away the Democratic caucuses from Iowa. Overall, what we're seeing with the Democrats is they're giving middle America the middle finger, and it has got to stop. We need to see our small businesses thriving, and to do that, we're going to push back on overburdensome regulation. I have a bill that would force federal agencies to prove that their new rules don't have an overburdensome pressure or obligation to small businesses, and we're going to make them prove it. So we're reintroducing that bill. We hope that the Senate Democrats will take it up and actually have a healthy discussion on what it is to support small businesses. So again, happy National Small Business Week.
Well, thank you all for being here, and Joni and I did not coordinate our outfits, although it looks like we did. You know, it's about time that the President did come to the table to begin negotiations with Speaker McCarthy. I want to congratulate him and the House for their efforts. They didn't drag it out to the last day. They got it done on a Wednesday. Great for them, great for you all as well. And I think they created a package that really said where and how they believe, in order to raise the debt limit, what kind of conditions should be on it. So I think what I'd like to do today is sort of go back to some of the comments. Senator Schumer said in November 2022, we'd like to get the debt ceiling done in this lame duck session, and it should be done in a bipartisan way. We agree with that. But then in February of this year, he says, we believe the House cannot pass a debt ceiling the way they're talking about. That's what we're saying. Show us your plan, because I don't think you can get one together. Well, proven wrong there. As we know, the President is going to have the leaders down next week. The House passed that bill. And I think it would be useful for us to go back to when President Biden was candidate Biden, when he asked the American people to send him here to be that president that was not going to be in the place we're in right now. So he says, I'm running to offer our country, Democrats, Republicans, and independents, a different path. Some of the same people are saying Biden doesn't just get it. You can't work with Republicans anymore. Well, folks, I'm going to say something outrageous. I know how to make government work. I know how to deal with the big issues. I try to recognize the limits of where they can go and try to find principled compromise. Compromise is not a dirty word. It's how our government was designed to work. I found that my whole life, and I will do that as president. These are all the statements that he made as he was trying to convince the American people that he would be the best president for us. And yet, when he had his chance, when he sat down with Speaker McCarthy over 80 days ago, he was stuck in the mud. His spokesperson said on at least 5 occasions, we will not negotiate, in very much in an opposite direction of what he told the American people the kind of president that he would be. So I'm glad he's come to the table. There is a way to find a solution, but it can't be one way and the other side has no way to do it. It won't pass the House, as Senator Thune said. It wouldn't pass the Senate either. And so I think it's time for the President to lead and negotiate with Speaker McCarthy.
One thing we've seen over the course of the last several months in this debt ceiling discussion is when it comes to our colleagues, the Democrats, and spending, the sky is their limit. It's unfortunate the Democrats want to jam a debt ceiling hike with no spending reform through a divided Congress. The polls are very clear. Supermajorities of the American people want to see restraints placed on future spending in exchange for lifting the debt ceiling. And I think President Biden and the White House were shocked. They were shocked by what happened last week in the House. They didn't think Speaker McCarthy and the Republicans could pass a debt ceiling bill, but they did. They passed a debt ceiling bill that had responsible reforms tied to it, dealing with the root cause of the problem, which is spending. It's unfortunate it took the President now 90 days before reaching out to Speaker McCarthy to come to the table, but they're still saying the debt ceiling is non-negotiable. In fact, a White House official who refused to be named was quoted in Politico, in this article here, calling spending reform a ransom. Can you imagine going on the streets of America and talking to the average person who's seeing $31 trillion of debt, and to tell them the White House officials are saying that having a spending reform discussion in exchange for lifting the debt ceiling is taking ransom? Biden and Senate Democrats need to get with the program and acknowledge something that Montanans already know. The spending is the problem. We shouldn't raise the debt ceiling without reining in, having some reforms in spending, reducing waste, lowering costs. That's a winning argument for the American people. To Senate Democrats, I say this. Saying that the president should not even sit down with Speaker McCarthy is not a sustainable position for the fiscal health of this country. Mr. President, it's time to get serious about responsible spending reform and to bring some fiscal sanity back to Washington, D.C.
Leader McConnell.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. What exactly are you for? Are you for the House Republican bill?
I'm for the Speaker, as I've said repeatedly, reaching an agreement with the President to deal with the debt ceiling. I think what the House has passed makes a lot of sense. To the extent that the President is not in favor of the House bill, and he obviously is not, he and the Speaker need to reach an agreement so we can get a solution. Look, let me remind you all again, divided government's not unusual in this country. We've had divided government more often than not since World War II. When the American people don't give all the power to one side, they're saying you guys need to figure out how to deal with the bigger problems by negotiating. This will ultimately, in my view, be solved when the Speaker and the President reach an agreement.
Leader McConnell, there's a real prospect that they are unable to reach an agreement. You have, in these past standoffs, proposed inventive ways out of it. Are you ruling out getting involved at all if there's no?
Well, what I'm saying is the conditions for reaching an agreement change depending upon the nature of the bodies. Many people point back to 10 years ago when President Biden and I were involved in reaching an agreement. That was a different set of players than we have today. If you look at the House, what they accomplished was a surprise to everyone, given the various factions. They're having achieved an outcome. It should be clear to the administration that the Senate is not a relevant player this time. They have got to have a measure that can pass the House. How does it pass the House? It has to have the support of the Speaker, and I'm behind the Speaker.
Leader McConnell. It seems as though you're asking for negotiation here, but there have already been several House Republicans that have said that this is their compromise, that they're not moving anywhere past this particular bill. Do you believe that if there is some sort of compromise that comes out of your meeting next week, that the Speaker agrees to, that he can get the votes in the House to get it over?
At the risk of wearing you out with redundancy, what I am convinced of is that the ultimate solution will be between the Republican House and the President. And the sooner the President and the Speaker get about it, the better the country will be off.
Leader McConnell.
That's usually my job. You can tell when he's talking to the microphone. He starts to pivot one direction.
I think he's done this with me several times. I don't want to exhaust you at the same time.
It's too early.
The risk of being redundant.
It's too early for McConnell to weigh in.
Yeah.
You know.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Jake.
It's a whole month before disaster.
Yeah.